Hey there. Have you ever felt torn between two voices? One whispers, stay safe, don't rock the boat. The other says, if not now, when? That's the tension of risk. Too much hesitation and we stall. Too much recklessness and we stumble. But what if risk didn't have to be all or nothing? Welcome back to the Strategic Thinker, or TST for short. If you're a regular, thank you. Your support truly shapes this community. And if you're here for the first time, I'm glad you found us. TST is a sanctuary for your mind, a calm space away from the noise where you can slow down, think deeply, and reset your direction. Every conversation here is designed to help you accelerate your path to greatness on your own terms and at your own pace. So wherever you are on your journey, I hope this time gives you room to dream, reflect, and build the next chapter with purpose. I'm Alan, your host. Each week, we dive into frameworks and real-world examples to help you grow with clarity, strategy, and heart. Let's dive in. In our last episode, we explored what I called the comfort trap. That's when a good job or role feels safe enough to keep, but slowly drains your growth. The paycheck is steady, the calendar is predictable. On paper, it looks fine. Yet something inside whispers, I'm not moving forward. That whisper can grow louder over time. You notice it on a Monday morning when energy feels thin. You notice it when friends ask, how's work? And you smile, but your answer feels rehearsed. Comfort, left unchecked, has a way of turning into quiet restlessness. Which brings us to a bigger question. If I step out of comfort, what happens next? This is where most of us stall, because moving forward feels tied to risk. Risk of income, risk of reputation, risk of losing what we've worked so hard to build. Our minds play out the worst case scenario. The savings gone, the resume scarred, the bridges burned. And if we see risk only as one giant leap, the kind that rewrites our lives overnight, hesitation is natural. Who wouldn't pause at the edge of a cliff? But here's the shift. Risk is rarely a cliff. More often, it's a staircase, a series of smaller steps you design, test, and adjust before you ever decide to climb further. Think about it. Almost every meaningful change you've made followed this pattern. Before you took on a leadership role, you probably tested your voice in smaller meetings. Before moving to a new city, you might have visited, met people, and pictured yourself living there. Even choosing a life partner usually comes through years of smaller steps. Coffee dates, shared experiences, difficult conversations. Not one blind leap. So why should career shifts or new projects feel any different? That's our focus today. We will go over 3 concepts, including what I called comfort tax and growth fee. These help reframe risk so it becomes less about gambling with your future and more about running small, intentional experiments. And to make it practical, we will use the P.A.R loop, plan, act, reflect. In a recent episode, we looked at this framework as a way to keep goals moving in real life. Today, we will see how the same loop transforms risk into something you can manage, track, and learn from. By the end of the episode, you will see that risk doesn't have to paralyze you, nor does it demand reckless leaps. It can be designed, tested, and adjusted. Each step gives you feedback, confidence, and momentum without burning bridges. When most people hear the word risk, The picture that comes to mind is pretty dramatic. A cliff edge, you are standing there, looking down. The ground falls away into darkness. The only way forward, jump. If you land, you win. If you fall, you lose. One decision, one outcome. That cliffside image is quite powerful, but it's also misleading because in real life, growth doesn't usually arrive from one heroic leap. It comes from a series of smaller, thoughtful steps. Steps where you can test the ground before you put your full weight on it. Think back to the last time you wrestled with a career decision. Maybe you considered switching companies, or starting a side project, or moving to a new city. Chances are, your first instinct wasn't excitement. It was some sort of fear. Your brain probably whispered, "What if I fail? What if I regret this? What if I can't go back?" That reaction is human. It's normal. Fear shows up because our brains are wired to keep us safe. They want the familiar, the predictable. But here is the shift. A healthy dose of fear can actually be a signpost, not a stop sign. It usually means you are brushing against the edge of your comfort zone, stepping into a place where real growth begins. So instead of letting fear tell the whole story, balance it with another question. Now, what if this works? What if this leads somewhere better? Notice how the focus shifts. The first set of questions point you towards loss. The second set of questions point you toward possibility. Both deserve space, but if you only ask the first set of questions, you'll stay frozen at the edge, staring at the cliff. That's why I like to reframe risk this way. Risk is rarely a cliff. More often, it's a staircase. Each step can be designed, each step can be tested, and each step gives you feedback before you decide to climb further. Fear is still there, yes, and sometimes you do have to take a leap. But now, instead of stopping you cold, it becomes useful data, a signal that you're pushing into new territory. And that's where the P.A.R loop comes alive. Plan, act, reflect. This cycle transforms risk from something terrifying and final into something you can practice in manageable rounds. Each loop is short, each loop teaches, and together they create momentum. When you picture risk in your own life right now, do you see a cliff, or could it be a staircase? So how do you turn risk from a cliff into a staircase? This is where the P.A.R loop comes alive. Plan, act, reflect. A simple cycle, but powerful enough to shrink fear into something you can manage, test, and learn from. We covered the P.A.R loop in detail in a recent episode, but here's how it looks when you apply it to risk. Plan. Most people freeze because they frame risk as one giant bet. Do I quit my job or not? Do I launch the business or stay put? Do I commit to this new path or abandon it? That all or nothing frame makes the decision unbearable. Instead, you might want to break the big leap into smaller experiments. 2 or 3 tests that cost less in time, in money, in reputation. The key question isn't, can I succeed right now? It's, what's the smallest version I can try that will give me useful feedback? Say that you're curious about public speaking. You don't need to start with a 500-person conference. A safer first step might be a 5-minute talk at your team's lunch and learn. That's your experiment. Or maybe you've thought about changing fields. Before you hand in a resignation letter, test the waters. Sign up for a short course. Shadow a friend for a day, volunteer on a small project. Each one is a step on the staircase, reversible, affordable, and yet rich in learning. Act. Then comes the doing. You run the test, but here's the important part. You don't just track results, you log your experiences. 2 notes, simple but powerful. Effort. Did it feel easy, moderate, or hard? Emotion. After you finished, how did you feel? Energized, drained, curious, dreadful, full of joy? Because sometimes the outcome alone doesn't tell you enough. A talk might go fine on paper, but if you left the room buzzing with energy, that's a signal to keep going. If you left exhausted and empty, that's a signal too. Reflect. And then you close the loop. Ask yourself, do I persist, pivot, or park? Persist if the effort felt right and the emotion was positive. Run the next round. Pivot if it was heavy but held a spark. Adjust the scope. Try a smaller slice or shift your approach. Park if you drained you flat. Thank the test, keep the lesson, and move on. This isn't about judgment. It's about curiosity. Every loop teaches you something. Here's a real-life story. I once spoke with a professional who spent a decade in finance but felt drawn to design. Quitting her job outright was just too risky, so she designed a test. She enrolled in a 6-week evening course. Each week, she treated the assignments as mini experiments. She shared her projects online, logged her effort and emotion, and paid attention to how she felt after each session. Some nights, she felt clumsy. Other nights, she lost track of time and stayed up sketching until midnight. By the end of the course, she had 2 forms of feedback: external, comments from her peers and instructors, and internal, her own energy logs. The result? She didn't just gain skills, she gained clarity. She knew design wasn't just a passing whim, it was something she wanted to pursue further. That's the power of the staircase. Step by step, each test giving you more data, more confidence, and more truth than fear alone ever could. So right now, what's one leap in your life that feels too risky? And what would it look like if you shrank that leap into a single small test this month? Here's another way to think about risk. Every choice we make, whether to stay comfortable or to grow, comes with a price tag. Comfort charges you slowly. It feels free in the moment, but the bill comes due later. Growth charges you up front. It costs nerves, effort, and uncertainty. But unlike comfort, the return compounds. Let's unpack that idea. Imagine you are in a role where the paycheck arrives on time, the calendar is predictable, and no one asks more than you can give. On the surface, it's a win. But beneath the calm, a quiet tax is running. Each year without new challenges is 1 year where your skills plateau. Each quarter that looks like the last is 1 more quarter your curiosity fades. Each time you pass on a stretch project, the market sees you as narrower than you really are. It doesn't feel like a loss in that moment, but 10 years later, the invoice arrives. You look around and realize doors that were once open are harder to push through. Recruiters see you only in one box. The comfort tax collected its interest silently. Now compare that to growth. Growth asks for visible fees and it asks them right away. Effort, nerves, a beginner's awkwardness. That's why it feels so sharp. It's the butterflies before you step on the stage, that sting of rejection after your first pitch, the frustration of struggling through new code, new language, or new responsibilities. Growth bills you immediately, and the payment could sting. But here's the upside. Growth pays you back with dividends. Every uncomfortable repetition builds confidence. Every skill earned opens new doors. Every test logged expands your optionality. Unlike comfort, growth's compounding works in your favor. Here's the key insight. The real question isn't will I pay? The real question is how will I pay? If you drift in comfort, you are deferring payment. It feels like you owe nothing today, but the balloon bill will arrive later. Bigger, heavier, and harder to cover. If you choose growth, you are paying in installments. Each loop costs you something small, a block of time, a stretch of effort, a pinch of nerves. But those installments add up into equity, skills, relationships, resilience, and perhaps more importantly, options. Think of it like home ownership. Comfort is renting. You pay month after month, but you build no equity. Growth is like a mortgage. Each installment stretches you, but over time, you own something of lasting value. So here's the question for you. Right now, are you paying the quiet tax of comfort or the visible fee of growth? And what's the smallest installment you could pay this month to keep moving forward? Let me take you behind the scenes for a moment into the story of Maison TST. When people see it today, they might imagine it began with confidence, a perfect plan, maybe even certainty that it will work. The truth? It started with a mix of curiosity and fear. Not the paralyzing kind, but the quieter pulse of nerves that whispered, "This is bigger than your comfort zone." At the time I started The Strategic Thinker, my day role was secure. Good pay, good colleagues, fair balance with life outside of work. On paper, I had no reason to start this. The stability gave me the space to breathe, but it also brought a quiet cost. Growth felt slower. My curiosity felt muted. And that's what I call the comfort tax. Invisible payments that you only notice when you wake up one day and realize that the spark is fading. So I asked myself, what would it look like to invest in growth instead? And that's where Maison TST began. Not as a grand leap, but as a staircase. I didn't quit my role or burn bridges. Instead, I ran small P.A.R loops, layer by layer, each one giving me evidence and energy to continue. My first plan was modest. Publish a single article, share one idea that had been bouncing around in my head, test whether it brought clarity to someone else. I wasn't thinking about building a brand, a podcast, or a community. I wanted to see if the spark I felt inside could light something outside. So I blocked out a slice of time each week, treated it as non-negotiable. Some days it felt effortless, words flowing onto the page. Other days, I stared at the screen, doubting myself, questioning whether anyone would even care. But I kept going. I logged the effort and emotion, energized, drained, hopeful, nervous. The data mattered more than the results in those early rounds. And then I reflected. Did writing feel like a drain or a lift? Did feedback, even from a handful of readers, suggest there was value? Could I see myself doing this, not just once, but again and again? Slowly, patterns emerged. Certain topics made me feel alive. Certain styles landed with readers. Each reflection gave me permission to adjust the next plan and run another loop. And here's the truth I don't want to gloss over. The fear never went away. It's still here. Every time I publish, launch, or share, there's a voice that asks, what if this falls flat? What if no one cares? But now there's another voice in the room. It asks, what if this works? What if this is truly helpful to someone? That new voice balances the fear. It shifts my focus from failure to possibility. It doesn't erase the nerves, but it reminds me why the work matters. Maison TST exists because of that tension, because instead of waiting for fear to disappear, I learned to carry both voices and keep moving forward anyway. That's why I often remind myself, a healthy dose of fear is good. It's proof I'm stretching. It's proof I'm not settling into autopilot. And it's proof the story is still being written. Where in your own journey might you already be paying the comfort tax without noticing it? And what would it look like to pay one small growth installment instead? Here's the takeaway. Risk doesn't require quitting your job, gambling your savings, or rewriting your story in one giant leap. Sometimes it looks like a staircase, and sometimes it's one article, one podcast episode, one project, one test. Small, honest loops that build into something bigger than you first imagined. And if you feel that nervous buzz right now, maybe that's not a warning to stop. Maybe it's an invitation to step forward. You don't need to launch a podcast or build a company. You can run your own loops in whatever pillar that matters most today. Money, relationship, knowledge, or well-being. The principle is the same. Plan a few small steps, act on them, reflect on what they taught you, and then repeat. That's how growth compounds. Here's today's insight. Risk isn't a cliff, it's a staircase, and every step costs something. A quiet tax of comfort or the upfront fee of growth. When you see risk as a cliff, your brain says don't move because it feels disastrous. But when you see risk as a staircase, something shifts. Each step is reversible. Each step is a test, and each step costs far less than standing still for years. And that's where the P.A.R loop becomes powerful. Plan the next step, not the whole staircase. Act on it. Small and focused. Reflect on what it taught you about the task, about yourself, and about what's next. And the currency shows itself. Comfort costs you slowly. A little dullness today, a little narrowing tomorrow, until the bill arrives. You realize a decade had drifted. Growth costs you now. The nerves of unknown, the sting of failure, the humility of being a beginner. Again. But unlike comfort, those payments are investments. They build equity that lasts. In each new post, each new episode, I still feel it. The hum of risk every time I try something new. But I also hear a new voice now, one I trained myself to listen for. What if this works? What if this helps someone? That voice is possibility. And the only way to honor it is to pay the fee of growth, one installment at a time. Because in the long run, greatness doesn't come from avoiding the bill. It comes from choosing the right currency. Today, we reframed risk. We walked through 3 key concepts: the myth of risk as a single leap, the P.A.R loop, which shrinks risks into cycles you can test, and the currency of risk. Comfort charges you quietly, where growth charges you upfront, but pays you back with freedom. Remember, you don't get to skip the bill. Every choice costs something. Even the choice to stay put. The only decision is which currency you are willing to pay. So, here's your challenge. Pick one small installment of growth you are ready to invest in this week. It could be a conversation, a class, or a small prototype of your idea. Keep it simple. Keep it honest. Use the loop to turn that step into learning. If this episode sparked something for you, share it with someone who might be standing at their own cliff. Remind them, it's really a staircase. And if you'd like to go deeper, I invite you into the listening room. Inside, members are the first to hear new episodes, gain access to private conversations not shared publicly, and receive occasional strategic tools to make these ideas even more practical. It's a curated circle for strategic thinkers, a quiet place designed to sharpen your path to greatness. Join the waitlist today at Maison TST/listening room. Next time on The Strategic Thinker, we launch a new Path to Greatness trilogy. It begins with a story of a dreamer who once sketched in black and white long before his visions lit up the world in color. His journey will show us how imagination, when paired with strategy, can reshape entire industry. You hold the power to shape your destiny. Strategic thinking is your compass. We will build an amazing future, one thoughtful decision at a time. Until next time, keep getting better every day.